I'm Bill Leahy, and I'm the president here at King's. And my first responsibility tonight is actually the honor of welcoming back to King's a very great friend of King's, Jerry Musquois LeBlanc, an elder from Kisikus First Nation in Saskatchewan. Elder Jerry has been asked to offer a blessing for this event. Elder Jerry, over to you.
This mic is on. Can you hear me? Excellent. So I'm just gonna give you a very, very short little teaching. A small but important first step towards reconciliation is to acknowledge the original people and their territory. So right now we're in Mi'kma'ki, which is the territory of the Mi'kmaq people, and we have to acknowledge that King's College is sitting on Mi'kmaq territory, on unceded and unsurrendered land of the Mi'kmaq. My name is Jerry Musquois LeBlanc, and I'm a Anishinaabe from Kisikus First Nation in Saskatchewan. Mi'kma'ki has been my home for decades, and I thank the Mi'kmaq for letting me practice letting me do my traditions in their territory. And I've been given a blessing. I've been given an honor to offer a blessing for this, for this panel discussion. All you gorgeous people, all you smart people. When I say a prayer, I pray to my Creator. So I'm going to invite you to listen to the prayer that I say, but talk to the person you talk to when you pray. Our feelings are going to be the same, I'm pretty sure, but the words are going to be different. Or you can just listen to what it is I'm offering, to Creator. And when I start, I have to speak my language to let Creator and my ancestors know who I am and why I'm here. So I'm going to start the prayer. Creator, Kchiminetu, Gizolk, Nindisnikaz Misquiganukwe, Nindo Demakwa, Nindujuba Kisikus, Mi'kma'ki in Dash Nindanungum. We honor you with this prayer. We are the descendants of those many peoples that you so long ago chose to live in harmony on Turtle Island. We give thanks for allowing us all to gather here today. Good Creator, more than ever, we need your strength, guidance, and truth. Give us the ability to recognize and use the gifts and teachings you have provided. Help us pass the virtues of respect and sharing to others. We direct our attention to the life forces on Mother Earth. She has given birth to all animal creatures and to all plants that nourish us. For this, we give thanks. We ask that you help those who are experiencing difficulty and conflict in their lives find peace and comfort. We pray for our Mother Earth so that she may recover from the many sores we have inflicted upon her. We pray for the good of our nations, communities, our families, elders, leaders, and medicine people. Creator, we humbly ask for your help so that the treaties between nations be respected, protected, and honored as they were intended for as long as the sun shines, the rivers flow, and the grass grows. Kachibinitu, we promise to work together so that all steps we take will become the path of peace for future generations. Waleliak, aho. Thank you very much. And have a wonderful panel discussion.
Thank you very much, Jerry. So welcome everyone who is with us this evening in Alumni Hall at the University of King's College, and to all who are watching remotely via live stream. So Halifax is also known as Jabuktuk, or Great Harbor, and I would like to take a moment to reflect on the land we stand upon and what this land enables us to do, as instructed by Elder Jerry. So for those watching via the live stream, I would invite you to join us in this, and also to reflect on the indigenous territory and peoples of whatever location is your location. So the University of King's College is located in Mi'kma'ki, the traditional and unceded homeland of the Mi'kmaq. In all that we do as a university, we must strive to be mindful and respectful that we do it on Mi'kmaq land, as guests of the Mi'kmaq, under the auspices of the treaties of peace and friendship that did not cede title to land, but instead promised relations of mutual respect, peaceful coexistence, and the sharing of resources. We recognize and honor the responsibility, unique role, and leadership of the Mi'kmaq in protecting the land, the water, and all of nature, including the forests of Nova Scotia. And we must remember how our university continuously benefits from being on Mi'kmaq land, and our responsibility and commitment to acknowledge the injustices committed against Indigenous peoples across Canada through and beyond residential schools. And we work to follow their example in teachings in how we participate in the journey of reconciliation, including by implementing the calls to action of the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So we also acknowledge the African Nova Scotia communities that are among the founding communities of this province, to recognize both the resilience of these communities and their people and the many contributions they have made and continue to make to Nova Scotia and our country. We must remember the lasting contributions people of African descent made to Kings in its founding decades through their enslavement, and the debt and reparative justice we owe them and their descendants to address the legacies of that enslavement, including the anti-Black racism of generations and of today. So tonight, we have the opportunity to focus on the power of journalism to effect positive change in society, with journalists who have been honored by the Michener Foundation for doing exactly that. This power is one that comes with significant responsibility for journalists, but also for journalism schools. As a university significantly defined by its School of Journalism, King's recognizes that we must make every effort to prepare future generations of journalists to grapple with that responsibility in all its complexity. And this is part of what we must do to implement TRC Call to Action 86, which specifically addresses the particular responsibility of journalism schools in reconciliation. So surely that must be the highest possible recognition of the crucial importance of journalism to the future of our country. We are also called to that responsibility by the calls to action for diversity and inclusion issued by our own journalism students and graduates in the immediate aftermath of the murder of George Floyd in 2020. We know there is much work to be done at King's and in journalism education more broadly. We will continue to listen, learn, and take action to deepen our relationship with and contribution to Indigenous and Black communities in and beyond Mi'kma'ki. With this in mind, I thank each of the panelists. They're here tonight, but they've been working all day, for the insights you bring into your work, for being here to share those insights, and your public service journalism. I have no doubt this evening will offer much to think about and to inspire change. It's great to see journalism students here tonight. They haven't had enough yet, apparently. I want to thank, on behalf of the college, the Michener Awards and its president, Mr. Pierre-Paul Noreau. And I also have to mention board member, English professor Kim Cairns, one of ours, for sponsoring this evening and this day, the first of its kind for the foundation, and also, I think, for journalism schools in Canada. And thank you also to the Rideau Hall Foundation, and especially to Jill Clark and her colleagues, and to my colleagues here at King's for transforming an idea hatched on Zoom while we were all under lockdowns of varying degrees into this wonderful in-person event for students and for Halifax. I would also like to express a personal appreciation to the Right Honorable David Johnson, chair of the Rideau Hall Foundation, past Governor General of Canada, and most importantly for my present purposes, holder of an honorary degree from King's. From a conversation that touched on many things came the idea that grew into this day, a day bringing us together to talk and learn about public service journalism and its future. I'm about to hand things over to this evening's moderator, Professor Brian Daly, an assistant professor in the School of Journalism. I'm very happy to say that, Brian. I'm thrilled to say that Brian has just joined us at King's after 26 years as an accomplished print journalist and news producer. In addition to teaching at King's, Brian oversees national education programs at the Canadian Association of Black Journalists. And one of these programs is J School Noir, a journalism camp for high school students that launched in Halifax in 2020, with the goal of encouraging Black youth to pursue careers in journalism. This program has been a tremendous success and is rapidly expanding into cities across Canada. And we are very proud of Brian for this work and of our association with it. Over to you, Brian. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate it, Bill. Thanks for coming tonight, and just for all those out there watching on YouTube, including my wife. Hey, how you doing? All right, so let me get right into it here. This is the capper event for the night, and it's good to see some students, including some students who I have been teaching this term. And so this is a great opportunity to pick the brains of some of our best and brightest in the country, because for those of you, who don't know, who are still maybe even trying to decide whether you want to do this for a living, journalism. Here you have Michener Award laureates, and just for those who don't know, the Michener Award is considered the premier journalism award in the country. And so I'm going to introduce our panelists, and we're going to talk about public service journalism, which is what the Michener Award rewards every year. First, we'll start on your far left. Caroline Touzin, who is a journalist at La Presse. Hey, Caroline. And Gabrielle Ducharme, her colleague, an investigative journalist at La Presse. And the two of them, well, we're going to actually play a video, and you'll be able to see the work that they've done that caught the attention of those behind the Michener Award. They were finalists just last year for a series. Tim Bousquet, who's the editor and publisher here in Halifax, the Halifax Examiner, and he's also an award laureate, a finalist in 2020. Kenneth Jackson to Tim's, it's Ethan to Tim's left. Ethan Cox is an editor at Ricochet Media, also on the board of the Quebec Community Newspaper Association, and a recipient just this year of the Michener Deacon Fellowship, and you'll get a few details in the video we're about to show you. And to Ethan's left, Kenneth Jackson, who's an investigative reporter at APTN, Aboriginal People's Television Network, and a 2020 Michener Award winner. So before we even get into the meat of our panel, I wanted to give you some more detail as to what this distinguished panel has done to capture the attention of the Michener Awards.
I'm Tim Bousquet, editor of the Halifax Examiner. The Examiner is nominated for a series of articles we did called Dead Wrong. It's our investigation into the wrongful conviction of Glenn Assoon. In 1999, Glenn was convicted for the murder of his former girlfriend, a woman named Brenda Way. He always maintained his innocence. When the Examiner looked into Glenn's case, we found all the hallmarks of a wrongful conviction: tunnel vision by police, witnesses who colluded with each other, jailhouse snitches, and a problematic eyewitness identification. So the Halifax Examiner teamed up with the CBC and the Canadian Presse to hire a lawyer to get those court files unsealed. We won that case in July of 2019. And what we learned was even more problematic than the original wrongful conviction. We learned that in 2004, the RCMP had evidence that should have cleared Glenn for the murder, but they destroyed that evidence. As a result, Glenn spent 10 more years in prison.
Bonjour, je m'appelle Caroline Touzin, journaliste d'enquête à la Presse.
Je suis Gabrielle Ducharme, journaliste d'enquête à la Presse.
Nous avons mené une enquête sur l'exploitation sexuelle des mineurs sur Internet, baptisée l'autre épidémie.
Pourquoi c'était important de raconter cette histoire-là? Bien, notamment parce que les cas d'exploitation sexuelle d'enfants ont atteint un sommet inégalé avec le confinement.
Pour les victimes, on souhaitait montrer que la loi sur l'indemnisation des victimes d'actes criminels était vétuste, pas adaptée du tout aux crimes technologiques. D'ailleurs, la loi a été modifiée après la publication de notre reportage.
Avec cette histoire-là, on souhaitait démontrer à quel point les cas se sont répandus et à quel point les forces de l'ordre sont débordées. Et pour ce faire, on est allé au Centre canadien de protection de l'enfance à Winnipeg. On a accompagné des escouades spécialisées de la police sur le terrain dans leurs enquêtes. On voulait aussi démontrer que les lois manquent de mordants pour encadrer les géants du web au Canada.
My name is Cullen Crozier. I reported on and produced the death report along with my colleague Kenneth for APTN Investigates. This story was important to tell because just saying that Canada's child welfare system is in a state of crisis isn't enough. We have to show the direct impact the system is having on children and families. The investigation began with the tragic deaths of 3 sisters in 2014. Sasha, Shania, and Arizona Bob all died by suicide within 7 months of each other. The sisters grew up in care of Wichitawan Family Services, a First Nations-run child welfare agency in northwestern Ontario. The 2-part documentary and subsequent online articles not only focused on the deaths of the 3 sisters, but also looked at the wider systemic issues facing Indigenous children and families in Canada's child welfare system.
Ethan Cox, along with his colleague Aaron Cedar, was awarded the Michener Deacon Fellowship for Investigative Journalism earlier this year. Their investigative project will try to determine how deep a problem police misconduct is in Canada and examine the role of public accountability structures around policing. The panel of judges was impressed with the team of independent-minded journalists Ricochet put together from all across Canada, the project's original data-driven analysis, and the inclusion of victims' point of view. The investigation's results will be published on the Ricochet websites, both in English and in French. The Michener Deacon Fellowship awarded $40,000 towards this project.
Excellent. And Cullen Crozier was not able to make it today to Halifax, sending his regrets. Kathy Tomlinson, also an investigative journalist with the CBC, also sends her regrets. So let's get right into it. You know, I grew up in this country, born and raised. My parents are from the Caribbean, and they came here in part because of certain things they were told about Canada. Peaceful, opportunity. People are polite. My mother was even told when she was applying to come to Canada that Canadians don't curse. And she quickly found that not to be true. The part of this mythology of Canada, I think, inculcates in people's minds that we're boring, that things happen, things unfold as they should, that we're a country of justice, including social justice. And when I was reading and looking at all of your work, a little bit depressing, first of all, but also it really did expose deep injustices. People wrongfully accused, people dying in care, exploited on the children exploited on the internet, that sort of journalism. So my first question then is, what role does public service journalism, such as that you specialize in, demythologize what Canada's really all about? And this is an open question. Yeah, yes. Kenneth.
Great nation. Canada has Canada has a very dark history, and particularly with Indigenous people, it's the greatest crime that's ever committed. It's the treatment of Indigenous people, and that's the way I, as a crime reporter, came to APTN. I saw it, but I was covering working crimes, and that's how I still treat it. Every death in care is a crime. Shouldn't have happened. They're removed from their families to be safe. They died. That shouldn't have happened. Especially Raven Bob should never have died on top of 1,000 times more than they. It was just insane to think about it, thinking of the sense that two of her sisters died by suicide leading up to her death within 7 months, one with 3 prior. Every alarm bell should have went off. Everything should have been done to stop this child from dying because she was trying to. But that didn't happen because as a country, we have issues, and we have things that we it's hard truths that hide in plain sight that we need to expose. And every single person along here tries to expose us, and that's what we do every day. We all have the same characteristics. As we've been talking all day, I've noticed we're all basically the same people. We all try to see injustice and do what's wrong, and I'm going to shout from the rooftop that's wrong. And we all have our different means of doing it. That's how I see it.
Right, the Americans do a great job of telling their own stories. We gravitate towards them a lot. Fact of the matter is, there are harrowing stories that happen here. So this is again an open question for all of you. To what extent do you feel drawn towards those kind of stories, and why do you think it's important to tell them?
I feel that these are the only stories we should do, and the only stories I want to do. I mean, I see our job as walking around with a flashlight, looking for rocks in the darkest corners, lifting them and putting the lights. And as Kenneth said, I want to fight injustice, not fight it, but put it into light. And I feel like you said we're polite. I feel that it's kind of a disadvantage because as a society, we're not vocal enough about all those things that don't work. And this is why our job is so important, because I mean, Canada it's true that we're peaceful and there's justice, but there's also many flaws, a lot of capacity in government, police, and we need to be out there and looking for them.
Anybody else want to weigh in on this question of the demythologizing effect of public service journalism?
Yeah, I was speaking with the students earlier today, and in my particular story, the Glenassoon story, I think of course it's just one story, but through the course of this wrongdoing on the part of the Halifax Police Department, and then wrongdoing on the part of the Halifax RCMP detachment, then wrongdoing on the part of the National RCMP, then wrongdoing on the part of the Crown Prosecutor's Office. I wouldn't go so far as to say it's wrongdoing, but a misservice of justice on the part of the judge. Then a devil-may-care attitude on the part of the Minister of Justice federally. You don't get the sequence of bad action just in one case. I mean, I think it's illustrative of deep-rooted problems throughout the entire system. And I hope that's a takeaway from the work I've done.
Ethan, we can't leave you out here. You have, tell people what your Michener honor is and what the intention is that will come of it. It's related to policing.
Sure, so to the question of myths, I think myths are lies that we tell ourselves to paper over what's uncomfortable, what we don't want to look at and face directly. And you know, those can have a purpose sometimes. But I think in Canada, we too easily tell ourselves this story about our superiority in comparison to someone else, how we're better than the US. We were just talking earlier about how manifestly superior it is in the United States to get access to public information, to get access to government experts, to get interviews. And I don't think many people in the audience would expect that. Did you know the US is way better at making information public and government experts public? So I think, you know, we can't make progress if we can't identify the problems that we have. And I think those myths you're talking about help to deflect attention away from the very real problems that we have. And one of the biggest problems that we have in this country, and it's not one that's unique to this country, but it is serious, is policing. And myself, personally, I've worked covering policing for the better part of a decade. And the one thing that stands out is that there is a complete and utter lack of consequences for misconduct by police officers. And that doesn't mean that all cops are horrible people, but if you take any profession, if you take any group of people and you say you can do whatever you want and there will be no consequences, you won't be fired, you won't go to jail, nothing bad will happen, that's going to empower people's worst impulses. That's going to empower the worst bad actors among that group of people to do whatever they want. And that's the situation we have in policing in this country. And I think the last few years have brought a little bit of a realization of that. I think even 5 or 10 years ago, people would have been shocked to hear that police were not trustworthy, that police, you know, that there were problems that went beyond a few bad apples, which is how I think it's been seen for a long time. But what we don't have in Canada is good data on the scope of the problem. And as a journalist working on these stories, that was a frustration that I kept bumping into, that there wasn't the kind of data that exists in the United States, that exists in other places. So the media do a good job of reporting on the anecdotal stories. So when the police do something wrong in whatever city, it gets reported on. We hear about it. But we don't do enough work of connecting the dots and looking at the bigger picture and talking about how pervasive these problems are and what their root causes are. So the project that we're working on is to create a database of incidents of police misconduct across the country, as well as the outcome for the officers involved. Because what we expect to find is what we see anecdotally so often, is that there are very, very rarely consequences of any kind for police officers who commit even the most extreme types of misconduct. And that is a huge problem that creates a total lack of trust between the police and the communities that they serve. In addition to that, we're going to be presenting, we're going to be creating that database, and then in the reporting phase, we're going to be pairing the data, the analytical side of that, with interviews with survivors and families of victims of police misconduct. And we're going to be partnering with local outlets in cities across the country to create reporting that draws on that data, but that is specific to that community and that community's realities. So what we're hoping to do is provide the data to fuel this conversation. We've started this conversation. We've started to have it. But for that conversation to progress, for us to achieve meaningful change in policing in this country and accountability when there is misconduct, we need to have the clear picture of how pervasive the problem is, how widespread it is, and that's what we're going to try and produce.
All right. So for the greater good, and I just want to remind everybody that there is going to be a Q&A section, so all of you are going to have an opportunity to ask anything you'd like of the panelists, and please do, especially those of you who are studying journalism, take advantage of them while they're still here. I think it's incredible that you know, you came from out of town. in this era we live in is extraordinary. And we love having you here. We love having you here as guests. Gabrielle, you had mentioned that desire on your part for justice to be accomplished through your journalism. So tell us, along with Caroline, how your stories moved the needle. What change, tangible change, came about as a result of your investigation into pedophiles preying on young people over the internet?
I would say not enough. But some, and I will let Caroline maybe go deeper in that, but just this is, as of now, it's like a 10-part series. So we're still working on it, and we're still working angles because we're still getting new information. And when we started, we really had high hopes because what we discovered was extremely disturbing. And maybe just to go back quickly, it all started with the testimony of a police officer in court who basically said the internet is a flood of men watching kids being raped and liking it, and as police officers, there's nothing we can do. We're just simply outnumbered. And for us, that was injustice. And that was, we saw opportunity for change. We investigated, we spoke with victims, with police, with social workers, with many hundreds of people, and we discovered so many problems, and some things changed. Some things can't change because it's just such a big problem, but we hoped that the laws that are, I don't know how to say, but
I can translate.
Encadré, qui encadre?
Yeah, so the laws that are in place that are entrenched.
On the big web companies would change, and that didn't, and that we were disappointed. But we did achieve some change. And
I think that, sorry for my rusty English, we work mostly in French, and for the past 20 months I didn't speak English at all, so sorry about that. But I think it starts with indignation, you know, and this is why Gabrielle told you that we want more changes, but the thing that we can be proud of, I think it's for months we tried to find a young victim who was ready to testify, to tell her story, and we finally find one, and she's a young girl, really strong, really resilient, who was lured by a pedophile on internet, and her false name, because we changed her name to protect her identity, it's Leah, okay? And Leah told us a really awful story because the predator that lured her forced her to took some images of her abusing of her little brother of, he was 4 years old. And she was forced to do that, but when Facebook closed her account, the cops thinks at first that she were the criminal, because she abused of her young brother, and they make the investigations, and they found the guy, and they arrested him, and she testified in court, and so basically the guy was convicted, but she was not recognized as a victim because she was she was victim of a technology crime, and in Quebec we have a law that was really vicious, really old,
outdated,
and so the state didn't recognize that she was a victim at the time, so she didn't receive a compensation for it. So it was like to traumatize her. It revictimisait. She was traumatized again
Yeah,
because of that, because the state didn't recognize that she was a victim. So after we published our story, the minister, the justice minister in Quebec, he's a father, and he changed the law. And when he made his discours, he talked about Leah, and he said, I read the story, and it was so, he was shocked about it. So he changed the law. It's not the only reason why he changed the law, but I think that our article, and of course the courage of Leah's courage, changed things for future victims and in Quebec. So it's a small change, but I'm all my career, I'm working for a moment like that because I always tell the same thing. I was not good in science when I was in high school. I can't be a doctor. I can't be, I can't save life. But my talent is to put some stories. I'm good with words, so it's my way to change not the world, but to improve the world where I want to be, and I want to raise my kids. So.
Right. And Gabrielle, did you want to add to that?
I just wanted, I think we always wish for change, and you have to write again and again and again and again on the same story and the same subject relentlessly. And sometimes it'll come, but it's really, for all of us, it's so, we get invested in our stories, and we wish for, we see the injustice.
Right, and even though the stories take us to dark places, Kenneth, you also have examples of how not too long after your series on the death in care went public, there was change. Can you tell us about that?
Well, in my submission letter, in our acceptance speech, I said that the 3 stories we entered were the tail end of a long year, and really a few years. Within that, so leading up to our stories, the pandemic hits, and I know there's kids who are about to age out, 18 or 21 in Ontario, and I focus only in Ontario. They're about to age out during a pandemic. And take yourself back to the time when the pandemic hit. We didn't know what was going on besides, let's stay home for 2 weeks and it'll be gone. That didn't really pan out. Then fear sets in. Well, people are dying. We see Italy. I'm thinking about these kids who are going to age out with nothing. And so I kept asking on the Premier of Ontario, Doug Ford's office and his people, what are you doing about these kids who are about to age out during a pandemic? Like, they're not going to have anything. Like, it's crazy right now. And their initial response was, we don't have an answer for you. And then I'm like, well, no, you got to have an answer. So I kept going back and going back and going back behind the scenes. And they still wouldn't give me an answer. So then I went down in my basement, because I have 3 kids at home and a wife upstairs working. And he has a press conference every day at 1 o'clock, every single time, same day. And I tried to get on there. And I'm like, I wasn't getting a question in. So I asked a reporter, like, how are you getting a question in on these things? It's crazy. But you got to get in early. So I got in 2 hours early the one day. And I was first in line, first up. He gives a speech about how he's not going to spare a cent to save everybody. And I'm like, great. You just said you're not going to spare a cent. What about all the children who are about to age out during the pandemic? Are you going to call a moratorium on kids aging out? He had no idea what I was talking about. And it showed. And then I followed up and I said, so are you going to do it? And he said, well, we'll talk about it. And 3 hours later, I get a notice saying there's a moratorium. So that's done. So that's one thing we achieved. We pushed that. It took embarrassment. That's generally what we do. We embarrass people in public. That's how we get change. Let's be honest. Second thing is, there was a kid that I knew who had aged out on March 1st, 10 days prior to the pandemic, which is March 11th. And he was with Michener Family Services up where I eventually would write a lot about. He was 21, aged out with no status card, no SIN number, no ID. So the kid can't even apply for welfare if he wants to, or unemployment or whatever, right? But it was welfare. Because he has no ID. So I tell him, I said, write your people up there and say, APTN's going to do a story, and I'll be in touch soon. Sure enough, I was in touch soon. And before he wrote a word, he had his funding back on. He had all his funding back, and they were getting his ID. And even his own chief sent him like $500 through email transfer, which is pretty sweet, you know. He's pretty happy about that. And then we settled in, and I was like, okay, we need to, you know, everyone's writing about COVID, and God bless those reporters for doing it, because it's not something I could do, because I just didn't want to do it. And we settled in on, we had a death report, and it was about a young girl who died. And this report, no reporter gets. I've never seen it in all my years of covering child welfare. It detailed everything. And from there, we went on, and we tried to prove that her death and the issues that related to it were still ongoing, which we did. But while that was going on, and all the work that I had done with Cullen, Crozier and I had done, and over the years, and the federal government announced like $600 million in funding for Bill C-92, which is allowing First Nations and Indigenous communities to take back control over child welfare, and their inherent right. During that press conference, the minister named me, which was insane, but he said, credit to Kenneth Jackson's groundbreaking work. So I guess in a way I had some influence on that. I don't like saying that, and I feel kind of silly even repeating it. But he mentioned me by name, which is quite extraordinary for a minister. And then I got to the work we applied to the Michener for. And, you know, someone told me after the stories, this is Treaty 3, right? So this is northwestern Ontario. You have Fort Francis, Kenora. It's a little pocket. They've never had a real reporter up there do much on these issues. Local media depended on advertising and whatnot. And someone said to me, who's quite prominent, I won't name him, but he's like, you put everyone on notice that if they don't smarten up, they're going to be in one of your stories. They know that now someone's paying attention, finally, to what they're doing. And I guess in a way, that's probably the biggest thing that Cullen and I achieved, is that we put them on notice. Now, that doesn't stop everybody to make them do the right thing, because after our story came out, some of our sources were attacked, right? And we had to continually, work those stories. So the change is going to be slow in terms of impacting the communities where these children are from, and they're part of this nation, are part of this child welfare agency, because Wichitawan is a First Nation child welfare agency that has 10 First Nations under it. Well, that's 10 communities, all in different states of their healing journey from colonization, right? So each one's going to be in a different state. Some of them are have a lot of work to do, and we're finding that out. So there's going to be a lot of hard truths, a lot of conversations. I think are going to happen that our stories triggered. But I think the most important thing, like I said, I took away is that for once, it wasn't free reign for everyone anymore, because someone was paying attention.
Right, exactly. That oversight, that watchdog role that we play. And I wanted to move to Tim, because you and your team spent 5 years on the Glen Assoon case, and a man who's wrongfully convicted. But then it ends up not being, in terms of the effect of your investigation, not just about one person. Tell us about the change that was brought about as a result of your reporting, the Examiner.
Well, I don't know that. I guess I have 3 very quick answers to that. In terms of the people that we've documented who have, I will say plainly, behaved criminally. People in positions of authority who broke the law and framed innocent man for a murder and then kept him in jail when they had good reason to believe someone else did it. in terms of the prosecutors who should have known what they were doing and the judge who should have been able to see what was going on. In terms of the justice minister who did not act, no one's been held to account. Zero account. They're all, one of the prosecutors is a judge. Most of the people involved in this story are either still working or happily retired. And there's been no accounting for it. But secondly, I would say the reporting, what we did was amplify Glenn's story in a way that the government could not make it go away. And I hope, I don't really know, but I hope that Glenn has some sense of peace now as a result of the reporting, that he has enough money to live out his life with something like comfort. So that's a good thing, and I think it's probably came quicker and was a bit more as a result of our reporting. Thirdly, I hope, and I don't know how you measure this, but I hope that we've raised public awareness of the failures of the entire system to a degree that people are a little bit less credulous that the cops are not to be questioned, or that they're always doing the right thing, and that we should listen to, the prosecutors all the time without question. And that's an ongoing battle, but I think we have advanced that public understanding. We've nudged it a bit.
I wonder, though, and this is for Ethan, do you believe sufficient pressure is being put on powers that be, particularly police forces, by news organizations themselves?
No.
I asked a close-ended question. I get bad marks for that.
No, it's the problems with policing are pervasive and systemic, and I think, we see news organizations often being too timid for a variety of reasons that sort of half make sense, but don't really add up. One thing that I heard today was that, there's hesitation, in places like CBC to try and hold a police force like the RCMP accountable for fear that journalists will lose access. And I found that kind of interesting because I think outlets like mine that have been some of the most critical of the RCMP have not seen any loss of access, because that's not really how that works. They don't get to pick and choose who they give access to. They want the media more than the media want the police. And I think we're moving in a good direction. I think that exactly as Tim said, that idea that the police couldn't possibly be lying or doing something wrong, that certainty of that has broken a lot in the last few years among the public, and I think that's really important and necessary. But I do think that media organizations in this country need to be more aggressive about holding the police accountable, because one way that I explain this to people is that when you report on the police, it's like going down a rabbit hole in Alice in Wonderland. The more that you stare at it, the more that you look into it, the more that it just seems completely unbelievable. It's very easy to look on a superficial level, all of us in our day-to-day lives, just, oh yeah, the police do this. Almost everything that we think about the police and what their job is and what they do and how they function is wrong. And that's very shocking. And then the more you learn about this, the more that you feel completely disconnected from everybody else and how everybody else sees the police. We have this idea that the role of the police is to investigate violent, serious crimes and hold perpetrators accountable. But that's not really what police do. It's a very, very small part of what police do in our society. Most of what the police do is step in to fill holes that have been left by governments that have cut social services, so that the police are the first and last line of response to literally everything. If somebody is having a mental health crisis, if somebody is having a fight with there's just a never-ending litany of situations where the police are undoubtedly the worst interveners. where you would be so much better off and have such a better outcome with a healthcare professional, a social worker, all of these types of things. And, you know, I think there's a huge chasm between how people understand the police and what the police are actually doing. And when you dig into that and you learn more about that, it's just really upsetting. And so I think that the first step in addressing the problems with the police is looking honestly, you're talking about myths earlier, dispensing with the myths that we have about the police and looking honestly at what their role and their function is in our society and how they do their job. And that starts with the media being, I think, more confrontational with the police. Because I think the police have certainly established that they deserve that treatment, that they deserve that skepticism. And so I think that is changing, and I think media are becoming more confrontational with the police, and I hope that that continues, because that's the only way that we're going to get to a point where we can have progress, where we can actually reckon honestly with the problems and find solutions. We have to start with recognizing the problems, and we're still not there. We're still not really talking honestly about the problems in policing as they really are.
Right. So we've established that Canada has problems. Certainly we've established that in the last half an hour or so. And we've also established that journalism can play a role in exposing that seedy underbelly in places where people may not want to look. Do Canadians want to look in those dark places? And are they willing to pay for the type of journalism you do? Double-barreled question.
Me?
Everybody. This is open for everybody. I'm transitioning now into the business challenges, the challenges of financing this type of journalism. Tim wants to
speak to that because I'm actually the only one here that actually owns a media organization. Somewhat. I mean,
you're for profit, right?
We're arguing about ownership
how best to pay for it. Let's argue about it. Let's talk about it.
Yeah, we have a growing base of subscribers, and it's enough to employ Zane and Yvette and Suzanne and me and Matthew and you know, so we have 5 or 6 reporters. Could always use more. We spend way too much money on lawyers, let me tell you. Could hire another couple of reporters with that money. But I think people value the work, or at least some people do. Strangely, I think COVID has brought people around more to the importance of local journalism, and they've been more willing to support us. I'll say that since the pandemic started, our number of subscribers has doubled. Part of that was also our terrible mass murder that we had here and the coverage from that. So I'm seeing that people are starting to understand that they got to pony up for this. And, you know, we provide a different kind of journalism than the advertiser-supported journalism. And this is all about training the public of the value of an independent press that you need to pony up $10 a month to support, and we're making headway.
Right, right. I mean, everybody here represents a different slice of media. APTN is a specialty channel, right? And La Presse is privately owned news organization. Let's start with La Presse. And
More, actually.
you're now.
We.
What happened?
Yeah, well, we were privately owned by one of the wealthiest families in Canada. And we changed the structure, and we're now non-profit, relying on advertising and benefactors. We are not, we don't have subscribers, but we ask our readers to give us money. And it's been surprisingly working really well. And as Tim said, the pandemic really helped us. We saw our readership, and the readership increased a lot, and the confidence of the readers also increased a lot. But I feel that there is still a lot of skepticism in the Canadian population or the Quebec population regarding journalists. Like when we knock on a door, people are rarely happy to see a journalist. Usually they won't say, "Oh, yay, finally a journalist."
We're used to that. Yeah, I'm used to that.
Yeah.
Doors being slammed. Yep.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I hope people are getting there more and more, and I hope that we can restore trust. But I feel it's not perfect, I would say.
Right. And I have to ask, Ethan and Kenneth, I mean, how sustainable is the funding model for what all of you do?
Not at all, really.
You know, a room full of students.
Yeah,
Great. Wonderful.
There are two models. There are two competing and very different models of journalism at play right now. And some things fall in a gray area in between, but one model is a more traditional model where it is really all about clicks and ad views. And so that model is what you see with the post-media papers, with a lot of the bigger outlets, where the goal is to get as many clicks as possible. And so the easiest way to do that is to have short, quick articles. And so we see in that model where there's a tremendous financial incentive towards short, quick articles, having journalists produce as many articles as possible per day, spending less time on copy editing, proofreading, fact-checking, these type of things, and really not doing much feature, investigative, in-depth work, because at the end of the day, is that going to get more clicks than the 20 articles that you could have produced in the same amount of time? And that model, I think, is not great for journalism. And I think what's perhaps a little encouraging of late is that there is another model developing and being advanced by a lot of digital outlets, by a lot of other outlets. La Presse is really an exciting example. But there are a lot of outlets that are trying to rely on recurring monthly donations from their readers. So like La Presse, we don't have subscribers. Everything we do is public. There's no paywalls. But we ask our readers to make a recurring monthly donation. And so that model is, I think, really exciting because it incentivizes the exact opposite when it comes to content. So in that model, the worst thing that could happen is one of these people that gives you money every month sees an article of yours that isn't up to your standards, that is short and incomplete and doesn't have all the context, has a bunch of errors, etc. And so it incentivizes the opposite, incentivizes producing a smaller number of higher quality articles. And I think we see now that a lot of journalism awards are going to smaller digital outlets that prioritize that type of content. And leaving aside even the fact that our largest national newspaper chain is owned by a U.S. hedge fund that ordered all their newspapers to endorse the Conservatives in the last several elections, which is a problem on its own, I think we have to look at the media landscape and we have to decide what future we want for the media that serves us. Do we want media that is beholden to corporate interests, that is focused on getting our eyeballs and our clicks so they can sell them to advertisers? Or do we want media that serves the public interest? And if we want media that serves the public interest, the only way that works is if we fund it ourselves. There's a role for government as well in supporting good journalism, but fundamentally, if we want journalism that isn't about you as the audience, as the reader being the product that is then being sold to the advertiser, if you want journalism that focuses first and foremost on serving the public interest, then you have a role to play in funding it. And the future of journalism in this country comes really down to how many people, how widespread that idea is of needing to pay for journalism. And I think the good news is that as each year goes by, certainly during the pandemic, more and more people are recognizing the importance of supporting that kind of journalism. More and more outlets are springing up and are finding bases of support. So it's really touch and go. It's really, sustainability is not something we've achieved yet, but maybe it's on the horizon, and I like to be positive about that.
And it sounds like the ordinary Canadian citizen might be the solution to this whole thing, is what I'm hearing from the funding model for La Presse and for almost everybody at this panel. And Kenneth, Just before we want to get to questions, it's 7:30, so we will get to your questions actually right after Kenneth talks about, your APTN being focused on Indigenous communities, Indigenous issues. Is that focus perhaps freed you up to be able to delve into some of these issues?
Well, it's so we're a TV station. We're mandated by the CRTC, and we have a news department. We have a program department, and I think when I first started APTN 9 years ago, there was less people trying to tell the stories that we were telling and that they told long before I arrived. So maybe there was a little bit more runway, a little easier to go about doing that. Now everybody's trying to do these stories, particularly now they find the graves, the body count. Media loves that. Now everyone wants to do these stories, which I guess in a way is good, but also what took so long? Where were you all these years? Maybe you could have prevented some of that. I know I'm getting off topic, but I don't have much to add to the whole media framework. I think everybody answered it pretty well. I just wanted to make that one point.
Yeah, no, exactly, because editorial decisions, how best to pay for, and this can be questions that some of you might ask too, is, if you're deciding what to do career-wise, where do you apply? What do you do? Do you stay independent? Some of you have your own websites and podcasts already. I'm going to, instead of babbling, I'm going to throw this open now to all of you for questions you might have to the panel about the work they've done, about how to do investigations and how to get started there, and also, how to get a job, how to remain gainfully employed. Any of those questions that any of you want to ask. We don't have a microphone, but you can ask it, and I'll hear it, and I'll relay it. Are we going to, do you want to walk through? And perhaps, if somebody puts their hand up, maybe Katie, you can, or you can just take my mic.
Sorry? I'm pretty sure I saw his byline somewhere. He worked for CBC for a long time.
Thank you. Just curious, you said earlier about being invested in your stories. How do you, I guess, stay invested but also stay impartial as a journalist?
Comment on reste impartial?
Yeah, okay. Impartial, it's hard to explain that. We're human beings, and so every single story I have is complaint. I don't want to use the word complaint driven because it's a very police term, but it's very much like that. People come to me with stories, and I hear what they have to say, and they get put through the ringer, I guess, to determine whether or not it's facts. But impartial, what does that even mean when it comes to what we're doing? What everyone here on this table is doing, we're trying to improve. I like that term to use, Carolyn. It was not to change, but to improve. I've often been told to fly above it. Fly above it. Don't get caught up in it. And don't go down with it. Don't wear it. That's not how it works. I've said it often. I wear this every single day. My family deals with it. My kids, my friends, my coworkers. Who I am is a journalist, and the stories I do define me and define everything. And to help people, to get really into the story, you have to get into it. You have to get down there. You have to dig, sort through it, get dirt in your fingernails, You have to do that. Because if you don't do that, you'll never truly understand what the real story is. It's just a fact. So this impartiality thing, what's impartial about right and wrong? There's right and there's wrong. And yeah, my moral code and my ethics determine what's right or wrong, I guess. I mean, individually, we all do that. But for the most part, right or wrong is pretty simple to spot. And sometimes there isn't two sides, particularly with Indigenous stories. There's one side, and there's the wrong side. And you have to see that, and you have to understand that. And I'm I'm a bit old school, I guess, when it comes to journalism. I'm not an activist. I'm not an advocate. I'm a pursuer of truth, and my job is to present that truth. But somewhere along the way, I guess I've kind of changed a bit to understand that you have to really live it to understand it. Because if you don't, you only know a bit of it, and what you're telling isn't the truth.
Before we get to our next question, Tim.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in here. There's this old school view, the view from nowhere, that we're this objective, unbiased reporter that drops in, I don't know, we came from Mars or somewhere, and we're just telling the story as the facts are laid out above us. That's bullshit. Everyone has a bias. We all have a place we came from, we all have a story, we all have life experience. There's no such thing as being impartial or non-biased. And to say that you're unbiased is a bias for the status quo. It's our job to, as reporters, to first of all reveal our biases, to be clear about what those are. I'm not trying to hide my, crazed lefty viewpoints from anyone, and and secondly, to be fair, not to be balanced, whatever the hell that means. But when I'm critiquing someone or reporting on someone in a negative light, to not lie about them, to try to understand where they're coming from best I can. I don't know. That's.
Before Ethan jumps in, I get more questions from students on this question than on journalistic, how to shoot, how to edit, punctuation and grammar. No. Students are really interested in this question, and I do tell them that, yeah, we all have opinions. So I was lied to when I went to journalism school. I'm sorry, I was. And the key, though, is bias, which is just inherent in people, has tended not to help the black community, coverage of our community. It's tended not to help the indigenous community either. So bias that results in shoddy journalism being done at the expense of certain communities is the bigger issue. And that's where I do believe in some of the old school journalism. Fairness is a big one for me, But I don't want to take this over. Ethan, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah,
Gabrielle.
I think it's important to recognize, first of all, Tim just put it so well, as did Kenneth, but impartiality is a relatively recent concept in journalism, and I'm not sure that we recognize that. Like some of the most prominent maxims in journalism are speak truth to power, comfort the afflicted and afflict the comfortable. The role of journalism historically was not to be impartial, it was to punch up, to hold power to account. And so, sure, if you're in a situation where you're punching down, then you're probably doing it wrong. And of course, fairness is incredibly important, but the role of journalists is to be a voice for people that don't have a voice. And it is, the idea of total impartiality, of the view from nowhere. There's this saying, and it's a cliche, but if you're a journalist and you speak to two people and one of them tells you it's raining outside and the other says it's sunny, your job is not to report what both of them said. Your job is to look out the window and see if it's raining or not. And that's really what we're supposed to be doing, is we're supposed to be holding power to account, but it's very helpful to power to say, actually, no, you should represent my side equally, and you should give what I think equal weight, even if I'm obviously doing something wrong. That doesn't serve the public interest. And so when it comes to questions of impartiality, I think it comes back to being a servant of the public interest. Absolutely, you should be fair to everybody in your story, but if somebody is doing something wrong, it's your job to expose that. It's your job to tell that story. And if you're ever in doubt about where you should be, what is the public interest? How can you best serve the public interest? And, as Tim said, and as Kenneth said, we all have biases. We all come from particular places, and I think we do our readers or our viewers or listeners a massive disservice when we pretend to be impartial, because I don't think anyone is impartial. I don't think that exists. I don't think it's a real thing. So when you pretend to have complete neutrality, to have complete impartiality, to have no opinions, you're just obscuring your own perspective that informs how you see these things from your readers. So I think your readers are much better served to know your priors, to know where you come from and how you see the world and how that might shape how you see the story that you're telling them, than to ascribe to some fantastical fairy tale of impartiality that was never what journalism was about, and really is largely an invention of corporate journalism in order to serve corporate interests. Because, so often it's the corporate interests that are doing something wrong. And it absolutely serves them to say, no, wait a minute, you gotta absolutely balance this. You gotta show that whatever terrible thing the corporation is doing is just as valid as the people who are complaining because they're, knee deep in sewage from what the corporation is doing or what have you. So I think we as journalists have to strive to serve the public interest. And so when it comes to things like climate change, there's no neutrality. Racial justice, there's no neutrality. We have to serve the public interest as best as we can understand it. And all we can do is try and do that as faithfully and as honestly and as fairly as possible.
I want to get to your question, sir, but Gabrielle also wanted to weigh in on this question of impartiality, or is it Caroline?
But you said a lot of things that I want to say, but I think that the big difference between an activist and a journalist is like, of course, both of us want more social justice, and there's a lot of good causes. But as a reporter, we have to ask tough questions, and sometimes the tough questions are not always directed to the one side, And I think there's many sides of a story, but to be a reporter is to never be afraid of asking questions, not just target one, like big corporate something. No. It's just to be fearless, to ask, be not inconfortable. You have to uncomfortable, and but you have to stay yourself. Don't play a social justicier if you are not believing in it. I know. Comment dire?
Be honest, be yourself. Don't pretend to be a social
yourself.
justice warrior if that's not who you are.
Mm-hmm.
And ask questions, tough questions to social justice warriors too. That is, when you're a reporter, you can do that too. You have that ability to hit them all.
I would say you have
Hit
to
all
do
sides.
it. Not you can do it, but you have to do it.
Yeah.
I mean, and when I said I'm invested in finding the truth. And once I find it, I mean, I don't think it's biased to have empathy. I don't think it's biased to cry with a mom who lost her child. It doesn't mean I won't challenge what she's saying to me, but I can have empathy and I can cry with her. And once I establish that what she said is the truth, then I think I can take that on my shoulders and bring it further.
All right, Mary, we finally get to your question. All right.
Thank you. Hello. My question is, what are your tips for students that want to get into investigating journalism?
I think you have to begin by dive into the field. You have to go out and begin to publish stories, small stories at the beginning, and you will receive some informations, and people will bâtir, they will build confidence in you and your work as a journalist. I'm a journalist for 20 years now, and I developed some contacts at the beginning of my career that are helping me now, 20 years later, to pursue some stories. So you have to build trust in your community when you write some stories, and there's no small stories, you know. So start to write, or broadcasting, or in the student media at first, and yeah, you have to dive into it.
You know, all journalism is investigative journalism. There's no difference, really. Every single story is investigative in some manner. It's just different tiers to it. When you're starting out, it's going to be very, you know, deadline driven, and it's very more hard news, maybe pyramid style or whatever you want to call it. You're going to be required to turn it around quickly, which is good because you learn. You learn how to do it. You learn how to develop sources. You learn how to talk to people. You learn how to write. And you learn what the truth is. You find it, and you see what's wrong. I didn't know everything that's wrong with the world that I know now, 20 years ago. I didn't even know about residential schools 20 years ago. I didn't learn until I was 27. That's crazy. That should never have happened. I learned, my history books in class were very not much like that at all. It was about canoeing and trapping. It's insane. But to me, like I said, every story is an investigative story. It's just, you're going to learn how to develop that more as you go along. And, you know, you look at us, and we're a bunch of unicorns down here. We get to do investigative journalism in an age where it doesn't exist really anymore. And we've been doing it a very long time, right? 20 years for the most part, for all of us, or more, especially for Tim, right?
What are you implying? What are you implying there, Ken?
Just saying, you have to work your way there, man. You have to. It's work, and it's a lot of work. And I always preach hard work. I've gotten where I've gotten because I've worked harder than anyone else around me, and that's just a fact. You will not work harder than me, and if I see you are working harder than me, I'll work even harder. So it's whether you want it or not. That's how you become an investigative journalist.
I want to say, go outside, talk to real people, knock on doors, and get uncomfortable. Best investigative reporting has a face to it. It's not just data. It's not just there's a victim. And it's hard to talk to these people. It's challenging. So practice talking to people you're uncomfortable talking to. I started, as many of us, covering car accidents and drunk driving, and I told this story this morning, but the way I learned was, I remember one specific story. A kid died, 16-year-old. He was driving the car. He was drunk. It was one of my first stories. I was working for a tabloid at the time, and my boss said, go and talk to the mom and get the picture. And I was looking down on that because I said, why? I mean, I'm going to bother this person, and it's not real journalism. But it is, because drunk driving is an issue, and it's, you know, and this boy was the face of that issue. And I still remember the house, what it looked like, the door, the feeling. I didn't want to go, and I did. I knocked, and it was really hard, and it's still hard. But I think this is the hardest part of the job.
My one tip is court documents. They're the most underutilized resource going. I'm amazed. I tell reporters, if they're entertainment reporters, go pull the court documents on that person, that rock star you're profiling. I attempt to have eyeballs on at least the filings of everything that's filed in Nova Scotia Supreme Court, which is almost doable in a province the size of Nova Scotia. But actually pulling the files and reading them, you see these amazing stories that are just sitting there waiting for someone to tell the story. It runs the whole gamut of humanity, and it's there in great detail. Police reports that generally aren't public are in court records. Testimonies, affidavits that people have signed, talking about all sorts of things. And these are starting points to go in and interview other people and so forth. But it amazes me that just reporters don't make it part of their life. And you should be, if you want to be an investigative reporter, that's a wonderful place to start, is just start looking at court documents in detail, and you'll see the best and the worst of humanity there, and you'll see trends, you'll see malfeasance, corporate wrongdoing, you'll see police wrongdoing, you'll the whole thing, court records. Yeah, yeah.
One thing I've noticed a lot with students and early career journalists is they'll have a good idea for an investigation, or they'll stumble upon something that's interesting and that warrants investigation, but they'll kind of assume that somebody's already looked into it. They'll kind of assume like, oh, I'm sure somebody's already chased this down, it must be nothing, or there'd be a story about it, or you Google and you don't see a story, okay. Excuse me. And I think one thing that's important to recognize is that as we're talking about here tonight, there is so little investigative journalism being done, relatively speaking, to decades past, that there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. There's a lot of really interesting stories that simply nobody's had the capacity to look into. So don't second-guess yourself. If you think something's interesting, if you think it's worth investigating, do it. And you might be holding the end of a thread that leads somewhere really interesting.
All right. Well, we're down to our last 10 minutes, so does anybody else have any thoughts, any questions? We do have a couple more questions. Are we still handing out the mic? We're still handing it around? Okay, so we have questions in front of you. One, two, we have several, okay.
Hi, thanks. No, I heard Caroline and Gabrielle speak earlier, and one of the things that really stuck with me was when you were talking about how when you approach a victim and wanting to ask them for an interview, how something that's really important is going to them and saying, this is what you talking to me can change. This is what the positive impact of this could be. And each of you has kind of talked about, you've dealt with vulnerable people in your reporting. And I'm kind of wondering, what do we owe to sources that we talk to who are in vulnerable situations or have been victims of crime when we're reporting on them?
What do we owe them? Well, I would say don't promise them anything because you don't know the outcome. I'd say you owe them honesty throughout the whole process. When someone says, okay, I'm doing this, because it's hard, it's not easy for these people for anyone to share the worst day of their life and then to know that it's gonna be out there. So talk them through it, tell them the impact that it can have, the positive, but also the negative, because some people get backlash more and more with social media, and then be honest with them, tell them how it's going, and don't show them the piece. That's not what I'm saying, and if it doesn't work, if there's no impact, tell them why. I would say that keep the channel open.
What are we going to do to get everybody's questions in who put their hand up? I want to get all the questions in one shot. So I'm going to actually, I wonder if we can hear you. I think you just speak loudly. We'll get your questions, and I'll write them down, and we'll get them kind of say, four more hands. Let's get all your questions right in one shot right now. I'll write them down, and we'll get everybody to answer. So, Touzin, you had a question?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, we've all been very tough reporting. I wonder if you could tell us quickly how you keep your emotional health afloat while reporting.
Emotional health, and what other questions did we have? Question about emotional health, mental health. Oh, three questions on emotional health. Well, it's an important one then. And Tim, just in the row two ahead of you. Yeah. Side by side, we have two questions here.
I was going to ask earlier, it had been mentioned that the pandemic brought a lot of people around, was the term used, like regular kind of citizens, Canadians who I guess weren't super invested in the news before but are now. I know a lot of people who are the same way, but they're going to institutions that I wouldn't necessarily call the most reputable news sources. I was wondering if how you kind of saw the future of journalism looking as more people are gravitating to it and not necessarily gravitating to, I guess, personally, the areas that I would turn, like, my close friends and family onto. So I
Right,
guess
so
future of journalism with more people gravitating to it.
quality versus low quality. And you had a question also?
I also did have one too. My whole question was basically, it is surrounding the future of journalism, but it was more on how the content is presented. So I've noticed now that we are shifting towards shorter content and trying to jam as much information in there. So as well as multimedia content as well. I was just wondering how that is now like going into the future of that. So.
Can I get the question again, please?
Okay. Sorry, I'm just trying to think of how to word it. Do you find that there's more multimedia content like being used in everyday journalism now?
All right, multimedia content and how that
like,
ties into the future of
podcasts,
journalism.
Short form media and print.
I think that might have to be the last one if we want to make our time. So, but especially that first one is a big one. Mental health.
On there. You know, people always told me, I've been writing about child welfare deaths for 4 or 5 years now, and people kept telling me to be careful, it's going to affect you. And I've knocked on doors, I've walked into funerals, I've done, you name it, I've been there. And yeah, you get used to it and you develop a thick skin, and I can break everything down and I can keep moving. Things can burn away or whatever, right? I can do it. But with this stuff, though, it does catch up with you, and it did for me anyways. And it started to manifest in ways that I find myself in just awful moods. I didn't understand why, it didn't make any sense. Yeah, I have young kids, I'm busy, life's tough, whatever. But the content, living amongst the trauma of other people, isn't what most people do for a living. I do, and we all do. How to deal with it is, I don't know if there's ever really a way to deal with it. You just do. You don't have a choice. If you want to do these stories, you have to hear these things. You have to develop. You have to blanket yourself with them, and you just learn to deal with it. So I'll go for walks. I'll try and I quit smoking 3 years ago. Anything to get healthy. I think that might help. Talking to people who get it. Like Cullen is someone I talk to every single day about things, even though, he's doing his thing. I'm just like, just an outlet. My wife's tired of hearing about it, so I gotta go to somebody. And, there's not a lot of people who want to talk about the trauma of other people. But I think that's the biggest thing is don't hold it in, because it bottles up. It did with me, even though I have done this a long time, a thick skin, and I didn't think it would. And I noticed I was short with my kids, I was short with my wife, and I was short-tempered, just on edge. And but if you want to do it, you have to do it. So you find a way through.
I think till it makes sense to you, it's worth it. I won't lie, I have scars, like I have some images that I will never forget, or some situations that I saw. I covered the earthquake in Haiti in 2010, and there's some scenes that I will never forget. But I care about telling the stories of Haitians at this time, and the stories of young kids abused by predators on the internet. So till it makes sense for you to tell those stories, I think you have to keep the work. And I'm running a lot. Sports for me, it's really important. It's like soupape. How do we say in English? In soupape, something to blow.
Help me out here, Ethan.
To blow the steam.
Blow off steam, a release.
Yeah,
Okay.
because we watch as young, not so young reporters, the oldest generation that were never home, drink a lot, and for real. And I don't want to become like them, because I don't want to ruin my my health for work. But we have scars, and we have to deal with it. So run or swim or walk or
More companies are making available health aid journalists who I don't know if that would have been the case once upon a time. So that's becoming increasingly available. And for those of you who are corporate, obviously the not to hold it in, to go and seek help to deal with it, because we do cover a lot of tough things in the course of doing what we're doing. Anybody else want to weigh in before we get to the last two questions?
The thing is, though, colleagues who don't do these kinds of stories tell us, oh, why don't you do a positive story? It will make you feel good, or, but we don't want to do it. So I think, speaking for me, my life is not balanced. It's not. I know it. I obsess about my stories. I talk about them all the time. I think about them all the time. I have nothing else. I don't do anything else. Is it healthy? No. I know it, but I mean, it's what drives me. Maybe it takes a particular kind of person to do that job. And I take long vacation in the summer because I get tired. It's, it's the accumulation of stories that's heavy. You're like a catalyseur, a catalyst. It goes through you. So yeah, I take 2 months in the summer. I on my own money, on my own time, and I just stop reading anything in the news. I just disconnect.
I think teamwork also helps. Yeah, we can on peut se compter. Yeah. We can share those stories, and and you, Nathan, you are working with your Kenneth, you work with Cullen on this kind of stories, and I work with Gabrielle is my work wife, so, and it's easier when you work, I think, in a team. Work wife, not wife, work wife.
Yeah, and well, I wanted to move on to the last two questions then. You're thinking about the future of journalism, and rightfully so, and so now, to distill this second question, it's how should the public differentiate between reputable and less than reputable sources, good and bad information?
I actually think we'll get better at this, the public generally. The social media and the bad actors who have been able to game the system are really relatively new. In this iteration of it anyway, using the internet and using Facebook and to spread lies and hatred. But I think that over time, all of us will get better at sussing this out. And I think we're at the worst right now. I think we're going to get better.
Just to add to that, there's also really interesting research on disinformation that shows that younger people are much more sophisticated consumers of news than often their parents' generation. And so I think that speaks to Tim's point that it's perhaps a learning curve, and we are getting there. Yeah,
good versus bad information. And in terms of the future of multimedia, it's kind of a personal area of interest to me. I was a TV guy, so I actually called myself a TV guy because I produced TV shows, but those lines are being blurred. So And I know for my kids, they don't really, the word TV doesn't really mean much to them anymore. I'm just curious where you think that's going. Are we going to continue to see a crystallization of all these platforms into just one platform? I guess we already have that. Where do you all stand on this whole question of platforms? Print, web,
I'll
radio,
jump in
TV.
and say what I said this morning. I don't think it's that important. You know, yeah, sure. 50 years ago, all there was print and a little bit, 3 TV networks and in every city. And the technology has changed, and the reporting has changed to reflect that. We have now a wide variety of things, podcasts and the internet and et cetera, TikTok and you name it. But I think that should, and this is something that could happen, should a big giant solar flare hit the Earth and take out all electricity on the planet and kills the internet, we could tell stories. I don't know if it's using chalk to write on sidewalks or using mimeographs or whatever. The platform is really a minor issue. We'll figure that out. I mean, we're all smart enough to learn the next iteration of whatever it is. The important thing is the reporting.
Right. I mean, I think that's a good note to end on, that the most important thing is the story, and get out there and tell them. Did anybody else have any other thoughts before we turn things over to Mr. Noro from the Michener Foundation? Yeah. I want to thank all of you for coming here. It's been a really important day for Kings, for the Kings family, to have all of you here, and hopefully you won't run out too quick. Hopefully we can all come down and ask a few more questions and talk a little bit before the distinguished panel does disperse. But before we do, well, first of all, can we get a little hand for the panel? Okay. Thanks so much, all of you. It's been a pleasure, and it's been a great learning experience for me too. And I just wanted to introduce the president of the Michener Awards Foundation, Mr. Pierre-Paul Noro. Just to let you know that Mr. Noro did join the Michener Foundation just last year, and he brought over 40 years of experience in newsrooms, from Canada's newsrooms, in the media, and that includes 7 years as a parliamentary correspondent during Brian Mulroney's 2 terms as Prime Minister. He also, Mr. Noro, had 5 years as president and editor-in-chief of Le Droit, a newspaper in Ottawa, and a long history with the Quebec City newspaper Le Soleil, where he was an assistant editor, vice president of news from 2012 to 2015. So, Mr. Noro, please.
Alors, bonsoir tout le monde. Première chose, à vous tous, merci de vous être déplacés pour cette passionnante discussion qui a lieu ce soir avec les journalistes à la table. Ces journalistes-là qui ont contribué par leur patient et rigoureux travail d'améliorer la vie de nombreux Canadiens. The Michener Awards Foundation exists to honor, promote, and celebrate excellence in journalism in Canada, particularly through public service journalism. For more than 50 years now, Michener Award meritorious nominees has proven that quality journalism is a bulwark against corruption, mismanagement, abuse, conflict of interest, and deception. Quality journalism changes the world for the best. It has a positive impact on the life of citizens who alone are often not able to change the rules and stop the unacceptable. If you have chosen tonight to be here at University of King's College, or if you have chosen to listen to these panelists, excellent panelists, through the live stream link, you are probably well aware that misinformation and disinformation are real and serious dangers for societies around the world. These forces are strong and undermine principles of accountability, transparency, and truth. On one side, we have journalists with very often limited means working within media outlets struggling for their viability. On the other, there are huge social media platforms with unlimited assets. There are also undemocratic governments and nebulous organizations looking to create disorder and imbalance to impose their views of the world and their rules. Amidst the rising distrust of mainstream media and an exponential rise in fake news, the Michener Awards Foundation has decided to show Canadians, and especially young Canadians, what excellence in journalism is and what can be achieved with determination, research, talent, and a profound desire to improve the lives of our fellow citizens. For us, the Michener Foundation, Halifax, and the University of King's College is a first step. With the clear interest and enthusiasm manifested today by the students during the different sessions and with the attendance tonight, there's no doubt in my mind that the Michener Awards Foundation will make similar stops in the months and years to come elsewhere in our country. It is now time, my turn, to express our deep appreciation to all those involved in this successful day. First and foremost, we salute the journalists who have traveled to Halifax to share their experiences with us and explain why quality journalism is so important and must be preserved and promoted. So, Kenneth, Tim, Caroline, Gabrielle, Ethan, you are as generous as you are talented. They deserve a huge applause. I want also to say to the marvelous team of University of King's College, which has made this special day possible, to President Bill Leahy, to the Director of the School of Journalism, Thierry Curie, to Professor Daly, to other professors and students, thank you so much for your warm welcome, interest, and enthusiasm. It has been a real pleasure to be with us all day. With you all day, sorry. I want to recognize here a special partner, a precious input of our partner, the Rideau Hall Foundation, and particularly the great communication team who works with the Rideau Hall Foundation, our partner. For months now, they have taken care of the organization and promotion of this event. The Michener Awards is truly privileged to benefit the expertise and knowledge of the Rideau Hall Foundation. Thank you, Jill, and shares the message, please. So, to my fellow board members, I want to recognize behind another one of our board members, there's Professor Kim Kierans, he's over there on the board, but also our friend Paul McNeil from Island Presse. He came from his island to listen to our excellent panel. So very pleased to see you, Paul, around. So I want to say thank you special to my friend, Professor Kim Kierans. because Kim is the secretary of the Michener Awards Foundation and more the caretaker of the memory of the Michener Foundation. Kim is preparing a book on the story of the Michener Awards and its legacy to public service journalism, a book which we know will be without any doubt of great interest. I know how she worked hard, so. Mesdames et messieurs, encore une fois, merci d'avoir été avec nous aujourd'hui. Merci d'avoir été là pour entendre nos fabuleux panélistes, leur poser des questions, saluer leur réalisation. Please support them by reading and listening to media with solid credibility. And come to see us on Michener.com to follow our activities, to make us some suggestions, and to discover the stories and newsroom creating the best journalism in Canada. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much, Monsieur Noto, and that concludes our program tonight. So thanks all for coming, and we're still here to answer some questions, but for all the rest of you, have a good night.